Today on Mike Attempts, fixing a PTO leak. The occasional drip from my Ford 860 PTO has recently increased, so time to fix it. I cracked open the rear axle fill plug, removed the drain plug, and nothing. Alright, let's try this another way. The entire PTO assembly is secured with 4 bolts. There it is. Now the shaft should pull right out. Let's see if we can unplug it. Some fluid still remains, so I figured I'd try pushing it towards the drain hole. That's when I found this. There was over a ½ inch of this sludge in the bottom, and it was the consistency of soft fudge. My dad passed this tractor down to me in 2015 and said he had replaced all of the fluid. While learning how to check the various fluid levels, I noticed that they all looked clean except the rear axle fluid. There are 4 drain plugs on this tractor, so he must have missed that one. Which means that fluid had been sitting in there for at least 37 years. When I removed the rear axle drain plug, nothing came out. One poke with a screwdriver sent it all gushing through. I flushed it out the best I could from the fill hole, filled it back up with oil, and thought I was good to go. This is what it looked like after removing all of the peanut butter fudge. I popped the drain plug back in, filled it with degreaser, and scrubbed it out the best I could. I removed the drain plug and filled a pump sprayer with more degreaser for a final flush. Then I wiped it out with some rags before spraying it down with WD-40. It looks pretty good in there now. Now we can tackle the shaft. There are 2 snap rings, one on either side of the bearing. Work the blade of a thin flathead screwdriver behind one end, pry it in and up, then slide the screwdriver around the outside until it pops out. The original gasket is still in one piece. My PTO shaft is 1 1/8 inch, and this adapter brings it up to the standard 1 3/8 inch size. I used a brass hammer to drive out the shaft. I had to jam a pick behind the second snap ring before I was able to use the screwdriver. Then I pulled it the rest of the way out with some needle nose pliers. I picked up this inexpensive bearing and seal driver set to make extraction and installation a little easier. They can be used with a hammer, but I'm going to use my press. I placed a large steel washer on top to protect the aluminum disc and pressed out the old seal. Even the seal was made by Ford. These are the parts needed for a PTO rebuild. See part numbers and links in the description. I specifically picked a kit that showed a metal oil seal, but I wound up with this rubber-coated style. I cleaned everything up and reinstalled the middle snap ring. Be sure the ring is seated and spins freely. I put grease around the oil seal spring to keep it in place and popped it in the freezer overnight. Even though it's mostly rubber, there is a thin ring of metal inside, so I was trying to give myself the best odds possible. Lube is required when pressing in a rubber-coated oil seal. The spring side goes towards the oil. I was trying to hurry so the seal didn't warm up too much, but haste makes waste. Did you catch my mistake? I completely forgot to use the aluminum disc from the driver kit, and only used the smaller steel washer. I can't say for sure that this wouldn't have happened if I did use the disc, but the seal is now higher on the outside edge and some of the rubber peeled up in one spot. Here's the chunk that was peeled off. And other areas around the edge don't look good. So I ordered a different style of oil seal. The original bearing feels and sounds good. I still haven't decided if I'm going to replace it or not. The shaft sleeve goes through the center of the oil seal, and I can feel slight dips in the steel. There's also a slight low spot on this sleeve, which goes through the center of another oil seal that separates the hydraulic fluid from the rear axle fluid. However, as far as I know, this piece wasn't meant to be replaced, so it's going to have to be good enough. I could try pressing off the bearing and sleeve together, but since I'm not able to press on the inner race, there's a good chance the hardened bearing could shatter and send shrapnel flying at my beautiful face. I covered the bearing just in case I decide to reuse it, and used the cutoff wheel to score the shaft sleeve. Don't cut too deep. Aim for about 75% of the way through. I drove a cold chisel into the groove to split it the rest of the way. I couldn't get close enough to the inner edge, so I broke out the Dremel. Since this is mild steel, it's much harder to split. It just wants to stretch. I think it's ready to come off. I was sick of hammering, so I used a puller to finish removing the sleeve. I did nick the shaft with the Dremel, and while filling it with JB Weld, I noticed the bearing wasn't even tight. If it was tight, I would have cut off the outer race with the angle grinder, and then used the same scoring method for the inner race. Since the races are hardened, it would have only taken a couple hits to crack it all the way through. While the original bearing does sound good, the new one sounds better. Since the bearing isn't very tight on the shaft, I decided to use some Loctite 545. I got the replacement oil seal, and this one's metal. It appears to be much better quality, so I packed grease around the spring and threw it in the freezer. In the meantime, let's press on the shaft sleeve. The only way I could fit the whole shaft in the press was to rest the center sleeve on the arbor plates. It's supported most of the way around, so I hope that's good enough. I don't think this sleeve will move, but I made a small scribe mark so I can keep an eye on it. I started by just pressing the sleeve flush with the top of the shaft. I used a steel washer to protect the surface. Next, I used the old bearing to push it down a little further. Now I can slide on a socket and press it most of the way. The only way you might be able to do this without a press would be to heat the sleeve up and try to pound it on with a brass punch. The shaft is bottoming out on the inside lip of the socket, so I use the old bearing again to finish. The next morning, I pulled the bearing out of the freezer and got it set up in the press. I even remembered the aluminum disc this time. Don't forget, The spring side of the oil seal needs to face the inside of the tractor. It was going smooth at first. The rolled edge of the seal doesn't leave much to press on, so I stepped up to the 63mm disc. I still have a little bit to go before reaching the snap ring, but this disc is too tight. The edge got peeled back. I filed down the damaged area, and now it fits almost perfectly. I clamped the shaft in my vise using some 3D printed soft jaws. Now I'm going to evenly tap the housing onto the bearing. Start the last snap ring with one end in the groove. If it won't fit, the bearing isn't fully seated. Once snapped in, it should slide freely. I cleaned up the gasket surfaces and applied a thin layer of Permatex Aviation gasket sealant liquid. Is it just me, or does this stuff kind of smell like overripe bananas? I think it's ready for reinstallation. The torque spec for these bolts is 35 to 40 foot-pounds. Looking good. Let's just hope it doesn't leak. I reinstalled the drain plug, removed the check plug, and filled until oil began pouring from the check hole. With everything tightened up, time to test it out. It's spinning smooth, and no leaks. Feel free to rate this video, add your comments and questions below, and subscribe for more.